Patrick, was a Romano-British Christian. Born in Roman Britain around the late 4th century to a Christian family, his father was a deacon. At about 16, Irish raiders kidnapped him and took him to Ireland, where he lived for 6 years as a slave and herdsman. In captivity, he turned deeply to prayer, experiencing conversion and a strong sense of God's mercy. After a dream telling him his ship was ready, he escaped, journeyed to a distant port and eventually made it back to his family in Britain. His call and mission. Back home, Patrick had another vision he describes as the voice of the Irish, begging him to return and walk among them as a missionary. He studied for the priesthood. Early Catholic tradition says he was later ordained bishop and commissioned for Ireland under the authority of the Church. Obedient to this call, he returned to the very land of his former slavery, not seeking revenge but to preach Christ and baptize. What he really did in Ireland. Patrick traveled widely, preaching the gospel, baptizing many and establishing local churches. Catholic tradition credits him especially with evangelizing Northern and Western Ireland. He ordained priests, organized dioceses and fostered monastic life, urging people to live in holiness, chastity, and missionary zeal. He faced opposition from pagan leaders and druids, and at times imprisonment and threats, yet he showed great courage and trust in God. His missionary work helped Ireland become a deeply Christian land that later sent missionaries across Europe. His own voice, the Confessio and breastplate. The most reliable sources are Patrick's own Confessio and his letter to the soldiers of Coroticus, where he calls himself a sinner whom God still chose to use. In the Confessio, he praises God for turning his slavery and suffering into a path of conversion and mission. The famous prayer known as St. Patrick's breastplate is received in Catholic tradition as expressing his trust in Christ's presence and protection in all things. Myths versus Catholic tradition. Catholic historians agree there is no solid early evidence that Patrick literally drove all snakes out of Ireland. It is usually read as a symbol of driving out sin and paganism. The popular Shamrock story may or may not be historical, but it does reflect his Trinitarian teaching. The true story in Catholic faith focuses less on miracles of nature and more on his conversion, forgiveness of enemies, obedience to God, and missionary charity. How the Church sees him. The Church venerates Patrick as the primary patron saint of Ireland, a bishop and apostle of Ireland, celebrating his feast on March 17th. Vatican and Catholic devotional texts highlight his faith amidst suffering, his forgiveness of his captors, and his example of total trust in God's grace. Catholic tradition holds that he died in Ireland after a life spent almost entirely in service to the Irish people's salvation.